Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, January 19th, 2016, getting into the week. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And our third hour guest today will be Dave Martin, who has got new information regarding the Mary Catherine Mahoney murder. Remember the killing in Starbucks of the former White House intern, and kind of a dark story there, and he's going to be talking about that. So that's in hour number 3. Now, getting into the news here, I couldn't believe it. When our show was just getting ready to start, I looked over at Fox News. Yesterday I was ragging on them because they were reporting the Florida 2016 Python Challenge because they didn't want to talk about what else is going on. And today they were out there with the headline that North Korea has invented a hangover-free alcohol. That apparently is what Fox News thinks is important. And, of course, it's another reason to go to war. Because, gosh darn it, those Alka-Seltzer people, you know, they're cutting into their profits if they have alcohol without a hangover on it. So, anyway, new information coming out about the Baghdad kidnappings. They were making a big deal about it. 4 Americans kidnapped in Baghdad. And then this kind of started to back away from it because it turned out that these were actually Iraqis who'd been granted U.S. citizenship. And now it's getting even more embarrassing because apparently some of these civilians were working for General Dynamics on a government project connected to the war effort. So, far from being a hostage situation, it looks like somebody did an intelligence snatch, as it were. All right, now then, looking back at Iraq, as you heard on the SRN news break, they're looking at Syria, 250,000 people killed in what they're calling a civil war. No, it isn't. It's always been, all the way along, a covert U.S. attempt to overthrow Syria's legitimate government and replace it with a U.S. puppet. Over in Iraq, the body count is climbing up. In less than the last 2 years, between January of 2014 and October of last year, 18,802 civilians were killed. 36,000 civilians were wounded. 3.2 million have been displaced. This according to the United Nations. That is not counting the military deaths and injuries. This is just the civilian number. Now, getting on back to Syria, Russia's Air Force has hit almost 600 terrorist targets in Syria over the past 4 days. As they mentioned on the SRN news break, peace talks may be moot. The U.S.-backed terrorists are being driven out of the country rapidly. Russian and Syrian fighter jets raid ISIS centers southeast of Homs. They're out there really kicking butt, as it were. Russian attack aircraft hit ISIS camp in Syria using data provided by the opposition, the political opposition. So they're working together because they want these extremists, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, which we now know are U.S. puppets. They want them out of there, want them gone. Now, the good news is more than 40 tons of humanitarian aid have been airlifted into these besieged regions in Syria. Western media has been trying to say Assad is deliberately starving his people. No, he's not. These people are in areas controlled by ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And as a matter of fact, despite a deal to allow humanitarian aid into these regions, the Takfiri terrorist groups are blocking delivery. And by the way, collective punishment, starvation, is a war crime. Now, Putin and the Emir of Qatar are agreeing to intensify efforts to search for some kind of a settlement in this conflict. I wish them luck because a prominent Syrian analyst is saying that the Geneva Convention on Syria is likely to be postponed. And if they postpone it too long, there won't be a need for it at all, because this is all over but the shouting. Now, over in Yemen, The body count is piling up. Saudi Arabia didn't realize they were going to be walking into quite the buzzsaw that they did with Yemen. And now we are getting reports of Blackwater mercenaries, Blackwater Sea Academy, whatever they're calling themselves now. They're being killed. Once again, we're seeing private mercenaries being sent in to do the dirty work of slapping those people of Yemen back down and saying, you're out of your mind having your own representative government. You will accept U.S. puppet rule and you will like it. Now, apparently there was a Yemen missile attack on the Saudi coalition that killed 2 United States officers. It is a reminder that Saudi Arabia is acting as a proxy for U.S. interests in Yemen to force them to accept the U.S. puppet ruler that was imposed on them 2 years ago. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a couple of phone calls. Mo in Florida, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thanks, Michael. I appreciate you taking my call. I hope I'm not getting you off subject, but I figure you don't have any head problems telling me. I've been over your website in the past, and a lot of this question I have on 9/11 was, are you aware of this instance where Larry Silverstein on the History Channel said not that the buildings were wired for demolition? I heard him say that on that show. And there's a search on the Internet with a reward of, I don't know how much it is.
Okay, now he didn't say that they were wired for demolition, but he used a term called pullet, which is a demolition term.
No, that's up there, Michael.
Okay.
That's up there. No, this was another one on the History Channel. And when you go to the History Channel, they won't give you the episode. I saw this. I think you think you're crazy. But no, he said wired for demolition. I know the one you're talking about. I've heard that one many times.
Oh, boy, I would love to find that, and I can understand why the History Channel's not going to deliver that episode. I'm surprised it's not all over YouTube.
There's a reward on YouTube for somebody that comes up with it. But I saw it myself. And you really do start to think you're going crazy. And
yeah.
You hear other people talk about it. But there is a reward, and I just figured, maybe somebody had mentioned it to you. But he did say it. No, not what you're talking about as far as pull it. I meant pull the fire.
Well, now that I think about it, I did hear something about that where Larry had said the building was wired for demolition, and of course everybody's lights went off here because, you don't wire a building for demolition in the space of half an hour. It takes weeks and weeks of work to do it properly. And I can certainly understand why that video has been Orwellized by the History Channel. I'd love to see it, if anybody can find it. I mean, here's a challenge for Rivero's Rangers, and you don't even have to leave your homes to do it, is finding that video of Larry Silverstein admitting that World Trade Center 7, was it 7 or one of the towers?
No, it was 7. It was 7.
Wired for demolition. If we could find that,
I remember watching it thinking that, well, wait a minute, I've seen the Lazo brothers take buildings down. You can't. How did they wire that thing in like 10 minutes?
Yeah, you can't. You can't. If you try and put demolition charges in a building in 10 minutes, you're going to botch the job and it's going to flip over on its side. Boy, I had heard about it. I sort of dismissed it as, even Larry Silverstein's not going to be that stupid to say that on a camera. But if it's out there and anybody can find it, oh boy, would that absolutely be the clincher.
Well, it's out there. I just want to see it because I know I saw it and I remember it. And when I heard them talking about that, I heard him say that too. I distinctly remember it because he said wired for demolition. Mm-hmm. The word demolition was in there. And I don't know if it was wired or set up for demolition. And I thought, what the heck? But anyways, I know I heard him say it, and others have heard it too, and there is a reward. So I appreciate it, Michael. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. We're coming up on a commercial break, so we're going to have to leave Steve going off until the next break when we come back from the commercials here. I got too many windows popping open and closed all around here. All right, there's the music. We're going to take a break, 4 minutes for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go back to the phone. Steve in Massachusetts, thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Last week, Obama made a State of the Union speech, and I didn't get to see it because I really didn't want to kick my TV. But this caller called in not too long after that. She mentioned how there was a row of the military men who sat there expressionless. And I was just thinking to myself, they have to know what. You'd think they'd have to know what's going on with everything that's going on with them being bogged down in all these wars, never-ending wars. Obama relieving close to 200 high-ranking officers. It makes you wonder what they're thinking, and
well, they're all thinking that by showing up, they get to be higher-ranking officers somewhere down the line.
Only to be relieved.
Yeah.
If they disagree with them. I mean...
Oh, they're not going to disagree with them. I mean, that's one of the big problems, you know, when you get into the higher levels of military command. They're just as much politicians as anybody else, and they're going to go with the flow, and, you know, because they want the next star.
I guess what I'm getting at is, you think there's any chance of there being a coup somewhere down the road?
Anything is possible. I've been hearing there's a lot of discontent in the mid-level officer corps, and certainly among the rank and file who figured out that their life and limb is being risked to make rich people richer than they were yesterday, and that doesn't sit well because all these people in uniform signed up because they were told they were going to be protecting the United States from foreign threats, and now they're realizing they are the foreign threat against other countries around the world, and that doesn't really sit too well with them.
Yeah, and I remember when Obama wanted to go into Syria after they said that Assad had gassed his people. And I remember seeing on the internet there's a lot of military people who had a cover over their faces saying they will not fight in this war.
Yeah, I remember seeing those as well. And, of course, then we had the few like Lieutenant Aaron Watada, who didn't hide behind a card and just stood up and said, look, the Uniform Code of Military Justice says I have a right to refuse an illegal order, and these wars are illegal. And, you know, he paid a heavy price for it, too. They wanted to make an example out of him. Forget Uniform Code of Military Justice. Forget Geneva Convention. Forget international law. You go and kill the people we tell you to kill. Or bad things will happen to you. Anyway, listen, I need to let you go because we got a lot of stuff to cover before Dave comes on in hour number 3. Thank you for the call. And before we get on back to the news, since we're on the topic of Obama, I have a finger to wag at the United States Postal Service because on December 7th, Pearl Harbor Day, the day that will live in infamy, I sent a Christmas card to the White House, which is something I do every year. I've never gotten one back since the Nixon administration. And it's a nice, clearly printed label, Obama family, the White House, 1600 Pennsylvania, and I double-checked the address. And this actually came back just today and stamped by the post office, not deliverable as addressed, unable to forward. And that, I think, tells you all you need to know about the U.S. Postal Service. And I'm sorry it didn't go through. I'm sure the Secret Service screening the mail would have gotten a giggle out of it. This was the Elvis card and everything. But their loss. All righty, getting on back to more serious news. Ukrainian forces are shelling settlements in the Donetsk People's Republic's south. Still trying to get a war going there. Now, interestingly enough, Obama appears to be considering a change of strategy toward Russia. After all this Russia bashing and Russia's this and Russia's that, apparently Obama called Vladimir Putin on the Russian New Year, which was last Thursday, and just had a friendly little chat with him. And it's basically a U-turn on at least public U.S. policy regarding Russia. Meanwhile, Netanyahu is up in the European Union. He's now touring the Baltic states, trying to rally their political support against this European Union decision that Israel proper and the occupied territories have to be distinguished, and say that these settlements are illegal on occupied land. They are not technically part of Israel proper. And Netanyahu is screaming and crying and throwing a tantrum and saying you're a bunch of anti-Semites and we're going to have the Americans nuke you for it, because he wants what he wants when he wants it. Now, there's another little bit of a scandal. This was reported in Haaretz, how one of the Israeli state-funded settler groups, these groups that support the placing of more illegal settlements on the occupied territory to drive the Palestinians out, hired a private eye to spy on human rights non-governmental organizations. So they're out there playing dirty as usual. And Israel has even more to answer for because, as you know, there is, at least in theory, a condition that when the U.S. spends your tax dollars to buy weapons for Israel, but not clean water for the people of Flint, I might point out, there is a condition that these weapons are only to be used for the defense of Israel against aggression by its neighbors. Well, Israel has never complied with that rule, and apparently they've been forwarding on weapons to other pariah regimes, and they've been doing it all along. They were sharing these weapons with apartheid South Africa, South Sudan, Rwanda, and Serbia, supporting the genocides taking place in those countries, and now we can add Myanmar and Burundi to that list as well. Human Rights Watch is calling for an end to all business operations in the illegal Israeli settlements. The way boycott, divestment, sanctions is moving, they may not have to worry about it. Now, a lot of people are wondering just where did Israel get their chemical weapons? Do they have a secret chemical weapons lab? Probably they do. Like they have this not-so-secret nuclear weapons factory underneath Pomona. But it turns out they're actually buying these weapons from Monsanto. And apparently Monsanto has been linked to the white phosphorus used on Palestinian civilians in Gaza in 2008 and 2009. Got to change Monsanto's name to AFAB, which stands for anything for a buck, because that seems to be their entire business ethics. There's a $sign in front of it. Yeah, we'll do it. Why not? There's an alarming story coming out from Forest News, and this is a follow-on to Jade Helm last year. The Navy SEALs are undergoing training exercises in which they are instructed to treat the American public as if they are enemies. And this is alarming a lot of people, where our military seem to be conditioned and trained and urged to view the people of the United States of America as a potential enemy. That really doesn't sound very good to me. We've got to take another break for commercials. We'll be back with another phone call. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go right to the phones here. Tom in Baltimore. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. You know, while I was on hold, I pulled up what I thought was going to be some white papers written by some command staff in the military relative to policy comitatus, but computer pulled up some documents I didn't even know I had relative to what we were just talking about, J. Helm 15. I didn't realize that these pamphlets, and they're unclassified, were sent out to the local jurisdictions relative to asking to be invited to do these drills. I don't know if you want a copy of it. I can email it to you.
Well, certainly, but, you know, Jade Helm is kind of over and done with, but throughout the years, the central government has sent out some very questionable brochures to local law enforcement. I have one from all the way back in the 1990s, where the FBI was telling local police that anybody who was talking about the Constitution had to be seen as a potential terrorist and needed to be reported. I mean, that's how long this stuff has been going on. Yeah, I still have those on my server. I'll dig them out and repost them.
Government for years in the executive branch and law enforcement at the municipal, state, and the federal level. I never saw anything like that. I hear people talk about them all the time. I don't doubt that they happened and exist, but I never came across it, which, you know, kind of brings me to a point. The one caller asked about the military personnel. And I imagine the federal level works pretty much the way the state and local governments do. And sure, when you get to a certain rank, you don't want to lose what you've worked so hard for.
Yes.
And what I've found is that the good folks and the bad folks, unfortunately, will splinter into kind of covert groups and operate unto themselves to a certain extent. And they splinter to the point, though, where you've got a lot of splinter groups. And then you have to look out for the other groups. You've got a lot of these groups kind of infighting, looking out for themselves, looking out for the other ones. And it's kind of hard to get unified to really bring anything together and bring something down on the commander-in-chief or whoever the top dog is. So I can see where that would be something that probably is being contemplated and has been contemplated many times, but very difficult to pull together a coordinated effort, which you would absolutely need, of course.
Well, you know, it almost happened in 1933. you know, the Wall Street bankers were planning a coup against President Roosevelt, and the only reason it didn't happen was the guy they picked to bring the military in, Major General Smedley Butler, you know, basically pretended to go along with the plan, and then when he had all the information and all the guilty parties, he blew the whistle to Roosevelt, and Roosevelt had to basically classify it because all the bankers said, look, you arrest one of us, we'll crash your New Deal economy, and we'll make sure that you get the blame for it. And Roosevelt was not able to get any kind of justice or vengeance until the official start of the war with Nazi Germany, where he nailed most of these people with the Trading with the Enemies Act.
I'll tell you, people under my command were dying. I would be hard-pressed not to do something. Unfortunately, though, again, you know, constitutionally, you really would have to have such a coordinated effort, and that leads to people thinking about doing things that aren't so proper, setting people up. You know, I can almost see where JFK caught a bullet, depending on what they thought about his foreign policy and nuclear weapons. You know, I wonder about that sometimes.
Well, you know, again, something that we keep reminding everybody on this show, wars and assassinations or any of these things never happen for just one reason. The propaganda says it's one reason. Oh, crazed lone nut, it happened because of this. They want to give you a handle that you can put on it and say, okay, I understand what's going on, even though you actually don't. In the case of John F. Kennedy, there were a lot of people who hated him. Certainly Richard Nixon, because Nixon felt Kennedy had stolen the election. Organized crime who had helped Kennedy steal the election and then felt betrayed when Robert Kennedy launched his war on organized crime. You had the CIA for Kennedy's pulling the plug on the Bay of Pigs. You had Israel. You had
addled adulterer, and he was a runaround. You know, I would be concerned with his finger on the button if I were under his command.
Well, the other thing is Israel wanted nuclear weapons. Kennedy was absolutely opposed to Israel acquiring nuclear weapons. And finally, there was, of course, the Federal Reserve, which was losing huge amounts of money because of Kennedy's United States note. And when you have a whole bunch of disparate interests whose agendas overlap with a war, assassination, or whatever, that's when these things are going to happen. Because when you've got multiple players, they've all got plausible deniability. Because if somebody gets too close to the Federal Reserve, they drop a little bit of evidence that points the finger and blame at Israel. And when people get too close to the Israel connection, they drop a piece of evidence that points the finger back at organized crime. And that's how these things get covered up through the years, even though there's an incredible amount of evidence saying that the official story is a load of nonsense. Anyway, listen, Tom, got to let you go. Got to take another caller and get back to the news. So we're going to switch over here to Peter in California. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. I wanted to just mention a couple things about, American law enforcement and how they're getting more and more Israeli-like. And
yes.
There's a couple things going on right now. There's a suit by a Palestinian family that had suffered, I think their child was burned alive to death. And they are suing the Israeli government, demanding that the Jewish terrorists who burned their child alive, that their homes be demolished, just like the Palestinians are when they throw a rock at a Jeep, in Israel.
Now, that sounds like that's a fair thing to do. It won't happen, but it sounds like a fair thing to do.
Yeah. The other thing is, you remember the Dallas FBI station memo back during the Occupy Wall Street? They were openly talking about in memos about taking out the leaders of the Occupy movement with snipers.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
I remember the memo. I wonder who they were going to blame it on. The problem is Occupy was, there were a few spokesmen, but it really was a leaderless movement, and shooting a few people wouldn't have really significantly changed the outcome. I mean, look at what they did to some of the people out front there, like that veteran. They shot him in the head with a tear gas canister and caused brain damage. I mean, that's how brutal the U.S. government is with the American people, because the U.S. government sees itself as the new Roman Empire, and you are just the Roman slaves, and they're going to treat you like that when you get these uppity ideas about liberty and the Constitution in your mind.
Well, Michael, there was a video out that I saw over the weekend, and I meant to send it to you, but maybe I saw it on your site. But it was a video made by a bunch of Israeli soldiers who right now and for the last several months, it's been legal for them to go around and shoot demonstrators with 22 rifles.
Yes.
They kneecap them. They shoot them in the butt. They shoot them. Of course it can kill you, but even if it doesn't, if you get hit with a 22 in your knee, you'll never walk the same ever again.
Yes.
And they've done this to hundreds, maybe even thousands,
yes,
since October. And I just wanted to say that how far away are we from that level of brutality when they're talking about sniping at the Occupy movement guy?
Well, I think the reason they didn't snipe at the Occupy movement and the reason the cops aren't shooting protesters in this country yet is because we still have the Second Amendment, and the cops understand if they do something that is that obviously outside the law and the Bill of Rights, that there are likely to be a response.
Well, Michael, I'll tell you, that video was unbelievable. They just, with complete impunity, it's like they're going plinking.
Yes.
It's like they're like you talked about vomiting fields.
Yes.
It's like they're going out and shooting, like these people aren't human beings. They're shooting them with rifles.
Yes.
And maiming them for life.
22 is a small cartridge, but they could have hot loads in them. You can have an expanding tip even on a 22. And if you hit somebody in the temple with a 22 long rifle, yeah, you're going to kill them. It's going to go right through that paper thin piece of bone and right into the brain. Okay?
Thanks, Mike.
All right, we got to let you go. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to grab another phone call, and then I really need to get back to our news stories for today. So we're going to go to Tim in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Tim, are you there? Okay. Apparently, we do not have Tim. I'm going to put him back on hold. And we're going to get to the news here. Let's talk about the economy. Obviously, a lot of things going on. Through valiant effort, the plunge protection team managed to reverse an early drop in the stock market, and they ended up just barely in the green on the Dow and the S&P. And S&P, we're talking 1 point into the green. NASDAQ down 11. And at this point, I think they're saying, see, it's in the green, so the problem is over. And no, it isn't, because we know the market is being rigged. And they're still trying to blame China, but China actually led the rally last night. Their market did very good. And here's the important part to keep in mind. The Chinese market soared on expectation of a new stimulus program, where their central bank is going to create huge amounts of instant new money and pour it all over the stock market to make everything look good. What the drops we have seen this year are proving to everybody is the global economy can't sustain itself. It's on life support. They're keeping it alive artificially by just pumping more and more cash into it to make it look good. And, of course, the more and more cash they're creating to pump into the markets, the less and less the money you've already worked for and earned is worth. And you're paying the price for it with food prices are going through the roof. We've got low gas prices, but that's because of the oil supply glut, which is going to be made worse by the ending of sanctions on Iran. But it's still a giant fraud. Stock markets in the green do not mean the economy is functioning at all. For one thing, because of all the rigging, the stock markets are hideously overvalued, and all these banks that took part in the plunge protection team are holding huge blocks of overvalued stocks on their ledgers. And when a correction finally does happen, these companies are going to be insolvent overnight. And that's why they're stuck. They have to go on doing this. And it's not really helping the economy. It's certainly not helping Main Street America. It's just instant money pouring out of that legalized counterfeiting operation called the Federal Reserve and showering all over Wall Street to keep the money junkies happy. Bill Holter over at SGT Report is saying the collapse is here. It's just a matter of when the life support stops working or somebody decides to humanely pull the plug. Another story coming out of Zero Hedge, the imminent likelihood of recession, and it points out something that we need to remember from the past. The government will never confirm there's a recession until it's already well underway and too late to try and do anything about it. Looking at the shipping indices, the rail indices, the Baltic Dry Index, the retail numbers, it is clear we're going into a recession, or let's be a little more accurate. The recession we've been stuck in since 2008 is now getting rapidly worse. Art Cashin over at Zero Hedge is saying what we're seeing now is what you get before a crisis actually happens. And Art Cashin is warning that bankruptcies coming out of the U.S. oil industry because of the collapse in oil prices is going to cause severe stress in the financial system. And he thinks the rate hike of the Federal Reserve was a mistake. He's wrong. The Federal Reserve was the mistake. 100 years ago is when the mistake was made that doomed this nation to eventual collapse. Big bank stocks have been crushed. Here's why. And basically they're looking at the crash in oil prices. And when the U.S. and Saudi Arabia started this oil price war to harm Russia, they didn't think all the way through how it was going to backflash on them. And it has. Oil's below $20 a barrel. Oil companies are going bankrupt. The shale oil companies are going bankrupt. Nobody's going to miss the frackers. But all of those companies were financed, and those investments are going to tank. The IMF is out there saying that, it's not going to be a very good year. There's another article was over in mindweb.com called The Phantom Trade, about how everybody's trying to skew the numbers around and make it look like everything is going really good, but it's all slowing down. We have a supply-side system with no demand. And all economics comes down to a simple fact. You have to have ordinary people willing and able to buy what is being grown or manufactured and sold in the stores. As wages and salaries get driven down while costs and taxation goes up, the system breaks down. And all the stimulus and QA cannot stop that reality. All stimulus and QA is going to do is make the stock market look good as a propaganda tool. So they can stand there and say, well, look at the stock market. It's doing great. If you're hungry and homeless and you've lost your business and your job and you're hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, it has to be your own fault because look at the stock market. It's doing really, really good. It's another big lie from a government that survives on big lies. All right, let's see if Tim in California got back here. Tim, are you there?
Yeah, hi, Mike.
Hi, what's on your mind?
I was wondering why in the last couple of debates, the Republican and the Democrat, why nobody's talking about the TPP. And I was watching the RT, the Russian Today News last night, and he was saying that most likely the Fox and MSNBC just probably tell them that that's one topic they can't talk about. I was just wondering what your opinion was about that.
Oh, well, absolutely. The government does not want ordinary Americans looking at what's inside that TPP. A lot of it has already leaked out, and more people around the world are seeing the TPP and the TTIP as a corporate power grab that will further erode any safeguards against dangerous products and outright fascism. TPP is stalling in a lot of countries. There was a report that they're not able to actually get it ratified through Japan's legislature, and they don't want people paying attention to it because it is just a complete giveaway to corporate interests. They're going to have these arbitrators who work for the corporations making these final decisions about whether or not sovereign nations can pass laws warning against harm in products. And that really has a lot of people alarmed. Most of the world has turned away from GMO. Here in the U.S., they're banning GMO labeling. They're coming down on Campbell's soup for voluntary GMO labeling. And what these TPP and TTIP would do is allow corporations to to tell governments, no, you can't label these products as harmful. Doesn't matter how harmful they are. You're infringing on our profits. And that's what TPP and TTIP are all about. Guaranteeing future profits of corporations at the expense of ordinary people. And by the way, that too is the classic definition of fascism.
Wow, and then I think is there some provisions in there about the internet as well?
Oh yeah, all kinds of stuff. They're trying to shut down the internet and the independent media. They don't like the fact that they can't lie to the public with impunity anymore, and they basically want to turn the internet into another for-pay content delivery system. It's a TV set with a lot more buttons, and there'll be advertising, and there'll be programming, and this idea of peer-to-peer communication and sharing of information, that just has to go away because it's a tremendous inconvenience to those who want to rule the world.
Yeah, it just seems like an evil plan, and I think people really need to wake up.
Oh, it absolutely is, and that's why corporate media isn't talking about it anymore. But you can find plenty about it on the independent media and on the internet, and there are reasons to be absolutely opposed to it. Okay?
All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. We're going to start with Damien in New York. I may have to take you through the news break, but what's on your mind?
No problem, Michael. Good to talk to you. So it's inevitable. We're going to hit a deflationary period. It's got to happen. So the best thing that we can do is to prepare for that. So that is establish as a country, we have to have, all the things that are necessary in place. We have to have things that in other words, we need some sort of growth happening. So we need some sort of job base that's going to create some sort of growth. These things all have to be put in place before this period, and then we unplug or cut the cord on the stimulus and let nature take its course. There's a lot of private equity firms that are still pumping money into banks and so forth. They have so much capital at this point from all this stimulus and everything that they're able to give loans out at 2%. They're able to get money at 2%
yes.
and loan it out at 12%.
Yeah, well, that's how they make their money. Anyway, Damien, yeah. I got to put you back on. I got to put you back on hold. We got to take a break for our top of the hour news and commercials. We'll be back with Damien and a couple of other phone calls, and then I got to get back to the news. We got a lot to get through before Dave Martin comes on. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and I'm getting a lot of emails following up on the caller who said there was a program on the History Channel in which Larry Silverstein reportedly said that World Trade Center Building 7 was rigged for demolition. Obviously something that couldn't have been done in the short interval of time after the first plane impact, had to have been done weeks in advance. The show episode not available, but we've narrowed it down to which show it is and even which episode it is, and we're gonna try and hunt that down just a little tiny bit. All right, we're gonna grab some phone calls here, starting with Daniel in Oklahoma. Thank you for waiting through the news break. What's on your mind?
Hey, my call wasn't about 9/11, but it was about what the previous caller was saying about politicians and everything. I want to keep it short and sweet. I just think it's funny how they just are flooding the stage during these ridiculous debates with people that have nothing in the polls. They never did this really in previous years, and I thought it was funny. It's too bad the founding fathers didn't put something in the Constitution that prohibits a spouse from running for president because Hillary.
Well, when the Constitution was written, that was kind of something that just wasn't going to happen,
Yeah, that's before there was gay marriage or they weren't.
And by the way, I want to be clear on something. Okay, I don't have a problem with a family member of a sitting president later on becoming president. We had that with the Roosevelts. We had that with the Adams, okay? And if Hillary Clinton was really capable of doing a good job, I wouldn't have a problem with her running for the White House. The reason I am opposed to Hillary Clinton running for president is because of the long history of corruption that has followed her and her husband, okay? Not because she's, married and not because she's a woman. It's because I think she'd be bad for the country. I know she'd be bad for the country.
Yeah, I was just making a poignant joke. In 1788, they didn't really have that in mind, and during that time, women weren't going to be president in their thoughts.
Yeah, but I would be opposed to any such measure in the Constitution. Okay, and again, looking at how the Adams dynasty or the Roosevelt dynasty, actually, kind of worked out. I can't say the same about the Bush and Clinton dynasties. They're a different character of human being, but. I don't think there should be such a provision, saying that only one member out of a family. the case could be made either way. It's kind of a gray area. Anyway, listen, I am really trying to get back to my news feed, so I'm going to let you go here, and I'm going to grab another phone call from Damien in New York. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I was talking to you before the break. I'll make it really brief. I want you to get back to business and get your groove going again. What I was saying about this period that's coming is we have to prepare for it. So the best way that we can do that is we have to build some sort of a working base where there's income coming in. All these others. We have to change the laws.
Okay,
as far as
Damien, let me interrupt here, okay? It all sounds very good, but unfortunately, our government is in control currently of all the mechanisms you're talking about, whether it's the currency or the laws. And unfortunately, we're going to have to sit back and let it destroy itself, and at that point, we can step up and say, here's how we're going to do this better for ourselves. And I think going back to most of what's in the Constitution and those first 10 amendments is a really good way to go. And, there's no way to get this system to reform itself because it works for the people who are on the inside. Okay? I have been working for 20 years to try and get the government to be more truthful with the American people, to be in compliance with the Constitution. If they had any willingness to do that, they would have done it long before now. This government is lost. It's illegal. It's illegitimate. It's in its death throes. Let's stand back, watch it flop around on the carpet for a little bit, and then arrange a really nice funeral for it, and then set about building a whole new country.
I hear you. I'll let you go.
All right. Thanks an awful lot.
Did you hear that Bank of America posted their biggest earnings in biggest quarter in the last decade, in the last 10 years? They just posted their biggest earnings.
I'd be suspicious about the bookkeeping on that number, but good for them.
That's exactly what I'm thinking.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We'll let you go. All right. We're going to not take phone calls for a while because I'm way, way behind where I wanted to be on the talking points, and I got to clear up a lot of stuff before the end of the hour because we're going to be spending all of hour 3 with Dave Martin. All righty. Now, Iran is about to reclaim the oil market from Saudi Arabia. Following the imposition of the sanctions on Iran and Iran's oil flow to the world was shut off, Saudi Arabia took over. And everything was all hunky-dory until they tried that harebrained stunt of crashing oil prices in an attempt to ruin Russia's economy. And Russia's economy proved to be a lot more resilient than everybody was expecting. And conversely, Saudi Arabia's economy was less prepared to deal with the loss in revenue. And they're in serious, serious trouble. Now the sanctions are off of Iran's oil. It's flowing back out there at 500 million barrels a day. And it's changing the regional dynamic economically. And that's why the U.S. is trying to find some excuse to put the sanctions back on. They're already out there screaming, we're going to do sanctions for the ballistic missiles, and we're going to do sanctions because they dress funny, and we're going to do sanctions because, they paint their buildings the wrong color. The Homeowners Association is up in arms, or any other excuse they can come up with. Now, do you remember Cheryl Mills? This is one of Hillary Clinton's really close friends, and she's over in Ghana trying to convince that government to okay a 23-cent minimum wage in order to attract textile and apparel industry companies to build their factories there, which means a loss of jobs everywhere else. This at the same time Hillary Clinton is promising you that she will maintain a $15 an hour livable wage here in the United States of America. By the way, if you live in California and you do not have your Obamacare compliant health insurance policy, you could be looking at a tax penalty of up to $10,000 for your entire family. One way or another, they're coming for your money because they're broke, and looting the people is their last option. Now, there's an interesting article over in sovereignman.com talking about this encroachment on your financial transactions by the government with ever more strict definitions of what constitutes suspicious behavior. Walking around with too much cash is suspicious. You could be a drug dealer. Cops can take your money. No trial, no jury. They just take your money under the civil forfeiture laws. Applies to coin and jewelry dealers. If you're buying too much gold or too much silver, You may be money laundering. We can take your metal from you. Too many transactions in your bank account is considered suspicious. Too little activity on your bank account is considered suspicious. They can declare your account dormant and turn it over to the state. Withdrawing too much cash from the bank is now considered suspicious. And now the newest rule is that anybody buying real estate through a trust or a corporation to conceal their name from the purchase, that's money laundering. Well, that's absolute nonsense. A lot of people who are wealthy buy property through their family corporation or trust. A lot of movie stars do that for their privacy. They don't want the neighbors to know that Leonardo DiCaprio owns the house next door. And according under U.S. law, now Leonardo DiCaprio is engaging in suspicious behavior. He may be money laundering. Let's take the house. J&J is cutting 3,000 jobs in their struggling device division. Max and Irma's restaurants are closing 13 locations in the Midwest. J.C. Penney is in trouble, has decided they're going to start adding appliances to their stores, and hopefully that will save them. Yahoo is rumored to be cutting up to 25% of their workforce. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the economy. We're talking about all these places that are closing, going out of business, shutting down. Claire and I were down at our local shopping mall just the other day, and the number of storefronts that are just closed over now, it's very obvious things are not going well at all. We all know about Tiffany's. It's an iconic name, and like so many other iconic names, apparently it's in trouble. They had a very bad holiday shopping season, and they're going to be cutting jobs now. So, not looking good. Over in Iceland, things are looking up. So far, they have sentenced 26 corrupt bankers to 74 years in prison. The last one was sentenced for his part in the 2008 economic swindle. The charges range from breach of fiduciary duties to market manipulation to embezzlement. We need more of that here in the United States of America. Hillary Clinton was out there saying nobody should be too powerful to go to jail, which prompted a lot of laughter on Twitter. Well, let's start seeing you walk your talk. Let's grab some of these criminal bankers and put them in prison where they need to go. Now, speaking of Hillary Clinton, she's out there. She wants new Iran sanctions. Just had another debate where Bernie Sanders was leading in the after-debate polls, and yet Hillary's campaign is out there insisting, oh, Hillary's way ahead. Hillary's just soaring way ahead. And unfortunately, Hillary's getting her way. The U.S. is now arbitrarily starting to hit Iran with new sanctions over its ballistic missile systems, which was not part of the P5+1. And I'm sure the rest of the world is realizing what a dangerous situation this is, where the world is still, for the most part, centered on the U.S. financial system, and the U.S. government has weaponized that. You know, get rid of your means of self-defense or we will cut you off from the SWIFT system, from the petrodollar. You all have to be helpless before us if you're going to take part in our economic system. And looking at the health of the American system, I'm sure a lot of countries are saying, you know, maybe we're better off getting out now. We're seeing signs of that. China's dumping treasuries like crazy trying to get out of there. Now, I'm going to have to take back some of the bad things I said about Michael Bay. I have not seen the movie 13 Hours yet, but I'm reading a lot of reviews about it, and it does appear to document an important part of the story of the attack on the consulate at Benghazi. And that was this one group of soldiers who tried to get in there and save the ambassador and the rest of the staff. And they did save a lot of people. Body count would have been a lot worse. Now, already the Democrats, Hillary's campaign, Debbie Wasserman Schultz is saying, oh, this is just a Hollywood fiction. There was no stand-down order. I mean, you know, everybody was just too far away. It was just one of those things that happens. And then we got a news announcement from the Benghazi investigation in Congress. Trey Gowdy has come on out and said it is confirmed. Stand-down orders were given to the military around Benghazi. They were told not to intervene. Remember when Israel attacked the USS Liberty and the White House told the nearby U.S. forces, don't get involved? The betrayal is just as serious here. And we don't know why it came down, but it did come down. Trey Gowdy and the investigation have confirmed. And we had heard this before from other sources, that there were forces in the area ready to go to save the ambassador and the staff. But Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton wanted that place destroyed. And the most likely reason is they wanted to sanitize all the evidence of how Obama and Clinton were smuggling Libyan weapons to ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria using that consulate at Benghazi as the hub. That's the big, nasty scandal behind that whole Benghazi attack. U.S. military had rescue teams ready to go. They were told to stand down. Exactly where that order came from, we don't know, but it's definitely inside the Obama administration. Now, there's been a new development today that is going to complicate life for Hillary Rodham Clinton. The Inspector General going over Hillary Clinton's emails, the ones that have been released. We're never going to see the ones that Hillary deleted from her server. Those are gone forever. But the Intelligence Community Inspector General, Charles McCullough III, has basically come on out and said, on Hillary's unsecured email server, weaker security than Ashley Madison, there were documents that were classified even above top secret. Special intelligence reports known as Special Access Programs, classified SAP. That is serious stuff. That's the nation's deepest, darkest secrets. And they were on Hillary's private email server. Weak security, one known, totally open access point. So once again, I'm putting this out, and I'm calling on the Rivero's Rangers to spread this around. This is the question that has to be asked. The scandal behind the scandal of the email server. Was Hillary Rodham Clinton selling U.S. secrets using that email server to deliver them and her charitable foundation to collect and launder the payments? Because the Clintons did it back in 1996, the Chinagate scandal. Treason and betrayal at the highest levels of government is a fact of history. Judas versus Jesus, Brutus versus Julius Caesar, Benedict Arnold, the Rosenbergs, Jonathan Pollard, Aldrich Ames, Robert Hansen. It's a fact of life. And we know the Clintons have done this before. It is a question that must be asked. And it's a question that demands an answer. And the continuing silence from the government and the corporate media is not adequate. Now, Hillary is getting really desperate over the fact that Bernie Sanders' numbers are continuing to go up and hers are continuing to go down. And so she's going on the attack on Bernie Sanders about how he was the only person standing there at the debate who voted to deregulate the financial market in 2000, which we all know was a bad move. But, of course, Bernie Sanders was the only person standing on the stage who was actually in Congress at that time, so that was a safe claim for Hillary to make. The problem Hillary isn't going to mention is the fact that her husband, Bill Clinton, signed the bill and made it law. They're still claiming that Hillary is leading by 25 points, but Sanders is always winning the debate polls. Something's going on over there. Over at Huffington Post, looking at their numbers, it is clear. Bernie Sanders' numbers are going up. Hillary Clinton's numbers are going down. And because Hillary put her husband out there on the campaign trail, she has made Bill Clinton's sexual assaults and Hillary's handling of those current news and relevant to the campaign. Maybe her petard that she hoisted with. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I've been commenting on this strange disparity between the fact that Bernie Sanders is winning the after-debate polls, and yet the network corporate media keeps insisting Hillary has a solid lead. Well, the local media and polls have a different story, because we are hearing from WMUR-TV, Manchester TV Channel 9, that according to their polls, Bernie Sanders is leading Hillary Clinton 60% to 33%. That's almost 2-1, with 3 weeks left to go to the New Hampshire primary. Makes me proud to be a Granite Stater. All righty, getting on back to Bill Clinton. Hillary made one of her biggest blunders by going on out with that comment about victims of sexual assault have a right to be heard and a right to be believed, even though that undermines due process. We will believe the accuser. You know, rape is such a serious crime that even innocence can't be a defense. Lock them up. And then, of course, immediately everybody's saying, well, what about all the women that your husband assaulted? And she's, oh, well, you know, we proved that they were all liars. And no, they didn't. Bill Clinton has admitted to many of those sexual dalliances, assaults. There's one confirmed rape, Juanita Broderick, and all these women are starting to come forward and saying, look, we were threatened to stay silent or bad things would happen to us. Linda Tripp is out there basically saying that Bill Clinton slept with thousands of women, and Hillary knew, and only cared if the women became a political embarrassment. Now, there's yet another scandal on the horizon, going back to Bill Clinton, but it carries into the present day, and it has to do with Bill Clinton's pardon of Mark Rich, which was seriously criticized. And a lot of people saying there was obviously a payoff, and Mark Rich's ex-wife had donated almost $500,000 to the Clinton Library, and over $1 million to Democratic campaigns during the Clinton era. Now there's this story coming out of the New York Post saying that the largesse from the friends and family of Mark Rich continues to this very day. And if some of that has gone into Hillary Clinton's campaign or the charitable foundation, that's another issue she's going to have to deal with. So it's no surprise we're seeing this article over at Investment Watch blog, the Hillary camp in full-on panic mode as the campaign disintegrates. And they're looking at the trends on Hillary Clinton's polling numbers, and she is in worse shape now than she was back in 2008. And even with all the massive vote rigging and election stealing and everything that she did, she still lost. She came in third place. So they're getting very, very nervous over there. They don't know what they're going to do. They can't shake the email scandal. They can't shake the long history of corruption, cattle futures trade, travel office firings, Whitewater, Flowerwood, Castle Grande, the links to Iran-Contra cocaine smuggling. They can't shake it. And Hillary has been caught in so many lies, nobody trusts her. I think support for Hillary is a manufactured illusion, because you look at the video of Donald Trump's political rallies, sellout crowds, sports stadiums. Bernie Sanders is drawing huge crowds. We get these videos of Hillary Clinton events where they're basically getting the campaign workers and the production staff to crowd in and shoot her with a tight lens to make it look like there's people showing up. I remember a video from last year where she was doing a campaign event at this bicycle store. Nobody showed up. She's a manufactured illusion, and I think so is much of her support. To build a case for America loves Hillary ahead of a massive election theft. Story coming out of governmentslaves.info. Obama administration working overtime to execute audacious executive orders. And he's starting to run into some opposition from a lot of business groups in the United States, which are feeling harm from these unconstitutional actions by the president. Thomas Donahue, president and CEO of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, is saying that, yes, presidents have executive power, but they're not supposed to use it to just get around Congress and create rules and laws that are going to be very, very difficult to remove or repeal. And yet, that's what Obama has been doing, and he's not alone. Bush did it. Clinton did it a lot. Used to be a slogan in the Clinton White House, stroke of the pen, law of the land. Pretty cool, huh? Now, getting on back up to New Hampshire, Ted Cruz is pounding on the religion issue. He's going around New Hampshire, references to faith and Christianity and how strong Christianity will restore the country to greatness, which was actually part of the Nazi campaign platform. The party stands for positive Christianity. And Cruz, his demographic research isn't very good because New Hampshire is not an evangelical Christian state. It's mostly Protestant, mostly congregational, to be honest. And they're not really going to like this idea of tearing down that separation between church and state, because remember, when you're up in New Hampshire, you're in part of the original 13 colonies. And the family traditions going back to the American Revolution and the Declaration of Independence and the creation of our nation run deep in that part of the country. I know I'm one of them. One of my ancestors signed the Declaration of Independence. And we take a huge pride in that. And we understand there is supposed to be a wall of separation between church and state. I think Ted Cruz is spinning his wheels, which is about all he can really do right now. Donald Trump has deigned to notice Ted Cruz, pointing out how Ted Cruz, like Hillary Clinton, is getting huge amounts of money from Wall Street firms, big banks like Goldman Sachs. Now, here's the shocker that came through today. There were rumors all morning long that Sarah Palin, Caribou Barbie, was going to endorse Donald Trump. Ted Cruz had been counting on her endorsement, but the story we're getting is that one of Sarah Palin's children just got this weird, creepy feeling from Ted Cruz, and so, according to the New York Times, Sarah Palin has just given her endorsement to Donald Trump. I'm not sure that's really going to help, but it was nice of her to do. Now, another article coming on from Liberty Blitzkrieg. The DNC is feeling the burn. Debbie Wasserman Schultz faces serious primary challenge. And this is good news for the U.S. She's under attack by the Democratic National Committee for her obvious, blatant pro-Hillary. You will take Hillary and you will like it. She's almost bankrupted the party, trying to throw this race to Hillary Clinton. And now she's facing two challengers in the primary. And they're powerful challengers. John McCain is the same thing. He is not going to go through this primary without a challenge. Remember when I told you that there was going to be an anti-incumbency fever sweeping the nation this election year? It's starting to happen. We're getting word now the Pentagon may demote David Petraeus retroactively. He's retired, but they're going to take away one of his stars because he gave classified information to his biographer and mistress. But Hillary can store top-secret and above-top-secret information on a private email server with weak security and still be allowed to run for president. There's something seriously wrong with that picture. Look how hard the government comes down on people who leak classified information, and then ask yourself why Hillary is getting a free pass on this. It's because there's a bigger scandal behind there they want to keep you away from. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're getting word now that up in Iowa, Ben Carson has suspended his campaign activities for the day. Apparently, a van carrying some of his campaign workers got into an accident, hit a patch of ice, and flipped onto its side, was hit by another vehicle. Nobody died. One volunteer injured enough to be transported to a trauma center. The other three being checked at a hospital, appears to be okay. Carson is suspending his campaign for today only, but he's going to travel to be with the volunteers' family, which is a nice thing for him to do. All righty, let's go on down here, talking about immigration, how the European media betrayed the women of Europe. This is coming out of Sputnik News. And they're talking about how there was the New Year's Eve riots in Cologne, mass sexual assaults on hundreds of German women. The German media for 5 days did not report it until it was a big stink here in the independent media, and they had to acknowledge it. And when they finally did, it turned out there had been a string of similar assaults in various other German cities. Now, we've all been through this before, but I want to point something out. there is somebody, some entity with some real political power pushing this flood of refugees into Europe. Somebody with the ability to tell the German media, don't talk about what's going on. That takes some real juice to do. Remember in the movie JFK, Donald Sutherland played the mysterious Mr. X, who was based loosely on Fletcher Prouty. And he said, when something happens, who benefits? Who had the reason and who has the power to cover it up? Who had the power to cover up the mass sexual assaults in order to protect the immigration, the refugee agenda? There's some real juice there. Story coming out of Zero Hedge Countdown to the End. EU officials say Europe is going down the drain. The situation with the refugees has spiraled out of control. We're seeing more and more countries drop Schengen. They're losing their open border policy. It's falling apart. Now, in Germany, Facebook has started to implement Angela Merkel's ban on anything considered hate speech, usually meaning criticism of the immigrants who are coming on in and causing all this ruckus. So, again, along with the ability to tell the German media not to report the news, who's got the juice to get Angela Merkel to order Facebook to ban criticism of the immigrants? And Angela Merkel herself may be in some hot water. One of her allies is going to take the Merkel administration to Germany's High Court over the open-door refugee policy, which appears to be a violation of the German Constitution. Okay. Now, Piers Morgan, who's a movie star, but also a very intelligent man, penned an article over in the Daily Mail, an editorial, about how he's ashamed, or actually embarrassed today for Britain. And he goes on to basically lambaste the British Parliament that hasn't bothered banning a single British citizen from coming back to Great Britain after fighting for ISIS. But they set aside 3 hours to debate banning Donald Trump because of his anti-Muslim comments. They're trying to equate Donald Trump with Hitler and the Jews. It's not exactly the same. I mean, setting aside the fact that we don't actually have a clear, accurate picture of what did go on in Germany in World War II, the reality is that the Jews were already in Germany. They weren't flooding across the border from outside, out of control. So in these last few minutes before we get Dave Martin on the air, human cause, global warming, as you heard on the SRN Newsbreak, major snowstorm to threaten all the way from Washington, D.C. to New York City and Boston this Friday into Saturday. They're expecting a major amount of snowfall. They're still trying to figure out how can we blame this on human cause, global warming. Temperatures in Delaware are going to be down below zero. Over in Ukraine, 300 settlements are without power due to the bad weather conditions, mostly snow and ice taking down the power lines. You know, snow, that stuff that back in 2000 they said was a thing of the past. Okay, now there's an article over in Blacklisted News. There's a new development, a new gizmo to put on the car to prove why you have to have this year's model. And what they're going to do is they're going to take away the ignition key, because apparently they still can't make a reliable ignition lock over at GM. And they're going to have a new device. This is coming out of a company called Miris, and it's a product called iLock, where the car will look at your iris, your fingerprints, your voice, and your blood pressure to decide if you're really you and suitable to drive. Now, what if you have allergies and your eyes are bloodshot? What happens then? The car's going to stop? I prefer an old-fashioned mechanical key. I mean, they're already saying it's going to take 5 seconds for this system to decide if you're the right person and ready to drive. I can turn a key in less than half a second. Am I the only person who thinks this gadgeting and computerization of our lives has really gone overboard? And that maybe it's time to go back to things that are simple and actually work and are reliable? You know, whiz-bang is fun, but not as a lifestyle, I don't think. Russia is out there leading the organic revolution. They want to become the world's premier exporter of non-GMO produce. Here in the United States, of course, the U.S. government is embracing GMOs. The GMOs are wonderful, and we're going to drop the meat labeling laws. Just go to the store, eat what they sell you, and all will be well. If you get sick, that's good for the economy, because then you got to go spend money on the doctors. Panera is moving forward with their clean food agenda. They're banning artificial colors, flavors, and preservatives from its soups. And I'm sure that Blackwater agents working for you-know-who are going to be out there trying to plant E. coli and botulism and black mold in their food the way that happened to Chipotle. And I'm waiting for somebody to come on out and say, oh, Campbell's soup cans, we opened them up and there was a dead rat in there. That's what you get because you go against GMO. Now, there's a little bit of good news. Congress is actually looking at passing a law to shut down the Michelle Obama school lunch program because the food is unappetizing. It's getting thrown out. Kids are going hungry. The parents are angry. The school administrators are angry. What this was a program to condition school children to accept and eat corporate factory-produced food and not want anything else. And it has failed miserably. And they may pull the plug on that. This is going to be Michelle Obama's great failure as First Lady, the way Hillary Care was Hillary's great failing as First Lady. And I'd like to remind everybody that First Lady is an honorary title. It's not actually in the Constitution. There is no real office of the First Lady. They don't have any authority. They're just an ordinary American citizen who got lucky in marriage. That's it. That's it. Over in Flint, Michigan, the anger is building because the water company that has been pumping this toxic lead-laced water into the homes is starting to turn off the water for people who were refusing to pay the bills. And the citizens are absolutely right. The bills should be voided because what was coming out of the tap was not what was being advertised. Clean, safe water that you can drink and wash it. And I am still incensed that our government can send billions of your tax dollars worth of weapons to Israel, but can't fork over a couple of million to guarantee clean drinking water for American citizens. Anyway, apparently U.S. troops are being deployed to tell those people of Flint, just shut up, sit down, drink the water, we don't care what color it is. And it's some pretty nasty color coming out of those pipes. They're still trying to arrange freshwater deliveries, but the water company still wants to bill the people of Flint for all the toxic water that has been poured into their bodies over the last several months. And they want the governor of Michigan out. They want the mayor of Flint out. They want him in jail because this was done intentionally, exposing the people of Flint, Michigan to toxic drinking water to save a few bucks on the city budget. And in the long run, it's going to cost the city more because this toxic water is leaching the lead out of the pipes, and the pipes are going to fail and will need to be replaced. But hey, that'll happen in the next administration. Not my problem to worry about. We'll be back after our top of the hour news and commercials with Dave Martin. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room. We seem to be having some difficulty connecting with our third hour guest, but we have an entire hour, so Tom is going to keep on trying to make that connection, and I'm going to go on talking about all kinds of interesting things going on here. Okay, story coming out of Washington's blog. Propaganda has rendered the constitutional right of free press ineffectual. And it's a good point to be making here because the U.S. corporate media is compromised by the government and by corporations, and it makes a mockery of freedom of speech because freedom of speech is supposed to be there to protect the truth, not to protect the liars. We've actually had members of Congress come on out and say that campaign lies should be free of repercussions because it's their right to freedom of speech to go on out and make promises they have no intention of keeping. But that's not what the First Amendment is all about. The First Amendment is there to protect the truth. But fortunately, you've got the independent media here. Story coming out of Russia today called Offensive Propaganda, pointing out how the U.S. and its Western allies are ramping up the anti-Russia propaganda and then scratching their heads as to why the American people aren't buying any of it. Well, because we've been lied to so many times is why. After all those whoppers, we've been told by the government, and then they come out with another whopper, and they can't figure out why we're not paying attention. Now, apparently, Radio Free Europe has now been paired with a publication company to create a shiny new propaganda bullhorn for the United States, and they are tasked with bashing Russia. Got to make Russia look bad so we can sell another war there. All righty, we're going to go ahead and grab ourselves a phone call. Anthony in Canada, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. It was interesting to see the Democratic debate the other evening. You had 3 people on stage. You would have thought with all the people unemployed in the United States right now, you'd have a lineup for the amount of people for the Democratic nomination, but it's kind of surprising only to see 3 people up there. So that was, I found that kind of interesting. The other point I wanted to make, I liked your interview with Ken O'Keefe yesterday. I was always interested. Would you ever consider bringing on Wayne Madsen? I know Alex Jones interviews him at times, but it seems that Wayne Madsen at times, he has to go on Press TV to really talk about the other important issues like Israel. He had a good interview on Press TV talking about how the neoconservatives are instrumental right now in trying to get new sanctions on.
Let me see if I can get back in touch with him. I mean, we used to trade emails a while ago, and of course we finally got to meet face to face at the 10th anniversary of 9/11. But we sort of got out of the habit of communicating. But I'll get back in touch with him and get him on the show.
Okay, that would be great. And just one more point. It was funny. I was on Twitter, and I noticed on the AIPAC Twitter account, Lockheed Martin was kind of congratulating AIPAC for helping them sell F-35s to Israel. And it's kind of funny because, you hear all the politicians talking about how powerful the NRA is, but, it's funny, you never hear them talk about how powerful the Israel lobby is. So it kind of really tells you which lobby is really that powerful in the United States.
Well, again, the U.S. government is sending billions of your tax dollars to Israel for weapons, but they can't come up with a few bucks to guarantee clean, safe drinking water for the people of Flint, Michigan. That tells you how powerful the Israel lobby is.
Absolutely. And, it's funny you mentioned that. I use that exact same analogy. I was thinking, isn't it pathetic that they're sending billions of dollars to Israel and they can't even provide, clean drinking water to people in Flint? They have to rely on Share to send hundreds of thousands of clean drinking water bottles over there. It shows you how pathetic the state of affairs is in the world right now. It just, unfortunately, it's the way it is. And hopefully we can keep fighting and hopefully change things as things go along. But, that's all I wanted to say. I really appreciate your time.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go, and we now have Dave Martin on the phone here. Dave, aloha, welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, we had a little bit of technical glitches hooking our little wires together and whatnot. But I wanted you on the show because you emailed me last week about how you've been looking into the murder of former White House intern Mary Catron Mahoney, and she was murdered at the Starbucks, and you've got some new information about that.
Yeah. I've been sort of lying low on this issue since I was, I think, probably the first one to make it national news. It was a big thing here 4th of July weekend on July 7th. The news appeared on July 8th of 1997. Big local news, 3 people murdered in Starbucks, the workers there in a very low crime area in D.C.
Yes.
Very mysterious murder.
Not counting Congress, of course.
Huh?
Not counting Congress. It's a low crime area if you're not counting Congress.
Yeah. It was big local news, but it was just, crime's crime. It never gets outside of the city. But about 3 or 4 days into the story, I read in the long continuation page about it in the Washington Post that the night manager, Mary Catron Mahoney, one of the 3 people killed, they just mentioned had been an intern in the Clinton White House. Whoops.
Yes.
and with what goes on with the Clintons that we know about, I was pretty active in the, as you know, in the news groups back then.
Oh, you and I go back all the way to the murder of White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster. What's really interesting about the Mahoney murder is it happened at a time when Washington, D.C. was swirling with rumors that a former White House intern, or a White House intern with the initial M, was about to come forward with stories about an extramarital affair by President Bill Clinton, and they didn't know who it was, just there was the initial M. And Mary Mahoney was killed under very suspicious circumstances. Another White House intern, Christine Mirzayan, was also killed under circumstances. And then it turned out, of course, that the M that was coming forward was Monica Lewinsky.
I guess.
Yeah, they got the wrong M. They killed 2 out of 3 M's, and they missed both times.
Well, the real big difference between Mary Catron Mahoney, or Katie as she was known, between Katie Mahoney and Monica Lewinsky, it's a matter of sexual preference.
Yes.
Katie Mahoney was a very active, outspoken lesbian.
Yes.
One of the co-founders of an organization in Baltimore called the Lesbian Avengers. And she's been eulogized quite a bit. You can look that up on the Internet. She was a political, I call her political live wire. An activist, a person who didn't just sit and let things go along without speaking out, apparently.
Yes.
And that's another reason to be suspicious, but it's not a reason to be suspicious that she was one of Bill's girls. To the contrary.
Well, she was intern for some of the people inside the Clinton White House who were engaged in some very underhanded dealings, and they may have thought that the M was coming forward not so much with a first-person sexual dalliance, but maybe a third-person report. In any event, a lot of ex-interns with the initial M got killed off in very short sequence right about that time. Okay, we got to take a 4-minute break for commercials. We'll be back with Dave Martin, DC Dave, after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Dave Martin, who has been one of my correspondents, supporters, if you will, all the way back to the very beginnings of my website and the murder of White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster. Before we get back to Dave, though, I'm noticing on Fox News they've got Josh Bolton out there screaming how we've got to sanction Iran. They're the leading sponsor of state terrorism around the world. Really? Who's writing the checks for ISIS and Al-Qaeda, Josh? I mean, it's amazing. They're desperate to try and get Iran sanctions, trying to get the war. Their whole war agenda is falling apart. Now, getting back to Mary Mahoney, there is another angle regarding a possible motive for her being killed. When she was at the White House, she was interned to Doris Matsui, and Doris Matsui had come under serious criticism and investigation because she was illegally blocking Freedom of Information Act requests relative to the Clintons selling seats on trade mission flights in exchange for campaign donations. And this was all heading to an indictment. This involved Ron Brown, who had already said he was going to cut a deal with the prosecutors to evade jail time. And then, of course, he had that very suspicious plane crash that killed him and basically brought the whole matter to an end. But Mary Mahoney was on the inside of that whole attempt to block the investigation over the Clintons' selling of trade mission seats for campaign donations. It's an ongoing pattern with the Clintons here.
Yeah, that's right. That's another possible motive. And it looked like she was the principal target because she was shot 5 times and shot in the face. And in mob speak, when you shoot somebody in the face, you're sending the message that they've been talking too much. So it really looked the whole thing looked so suspicious from the beginning, which is why I followed it very closely, and I happened to be getting the Washington Times at the time, and at work I was reading the Washington Post. So I was getting two at once, and was able to follow it very closely. And there are other suspicious aspects of it. Her lesbianism, you know, that I don't know how much you've talked about Hillary's proclivities, but that might have,
it hadn't occurred to me, but you're absolutely right. And Hillary would want to be protecting her reputation even more than Bill. Then, you know, you had the aftermath where there was an informant, Eric Butera, who had information about how Mary Mahoney was killed. And before he could testify, police sent him into a known crack house, and somebody blew the whistle on him, and he was beaten to death. And his mother actually sued over the fact that they sent him into this house without any cover or protection. And the witnesses are just falling like flies, and all of this is.
And I think they paid off considerable amount of money to the Butera family on account
Well,
of that.
she was awarded $100 million in compensation, but a federal judge cut it down to just $1 million. And
that's still a considerable amount of money.
Well, I'm sure.
Let me tell you, this is how I have renewed my interest. I just read Roger Stone and Robert Morrow's book, The Clintons War on Women. And I told my brother I was reading the book, and he said, well, see if they have anything about Katie Mahoney. And it's turned out they didn't. You know, well, if you're talking about a war on women, this looks kind of suspicious. I'm in regular contact with Robert Morrow. I've met Robert Morrow, and I've emailed him a couple of times now and asked him why they left out any mention of Katie Mahoney. And he normally responds within a day or so, and I've still not got a response from him. Joseph Farah wrote, WorldNet Daily, who's been on the Clintons case for a long time, wrote a very powerful article before they found what I think is the patsy in the case of Carl Dick Cooper. But neither he nor WorldNet Daily had any follow-up after they pinned it on this guy Cooper. So Saturday a week ago, I just decided I would Google Mary Kate Mahoney and see what came up. And the first article is something that's posted in a website called Little Dixie Dynamite. Mm-hmm. It's called The Mysterious Murder of Mary Mahoney. And it's kind of a mysterious website, as it turns out. And interesting comments that have taken place over the last couple of years. It covers the case fairly well. Got some pretty engaging illustrations.
Yes.
But the comments, getting down to the end here, somebody just put Daniel DeLuca said an interesting article about the supposed killer and put up my original article called Starbucks Fall Guy. And then the next person on June 25th, 2015 said, interesting article. I don't know much about Katie's time at the White House, but I did know her. I am the one who found the bodies that morning. Oh. Whoa.
Okay.
Yeah, this looks like it's an interesting forum indeed. And the putative custodian of the website, Alana Moore, responds, unbelievable. Well, I'm glad you found this article, and I hope you got something out of it. It's actually the most popular article on this website and pulls in something like 50 hits a day, every day. Thank you for visiting and commenting. Well, this looks like a very good place to air the whole thing out. So, I hope I have time to read this here. I posted...
Well, I'll tell you what, we're coming up on a commercial break here in about another half minute, and I'd like you to read it when we come back on the commercial break there.
I'm going to do after the break.
Okay. But
I'm going to read you what I wrote, and it's still on my computer. I can look at it and read it. But at the bottom it says, continue. This has been more than a week now. Your comment is awaiting moderation.
Mm-hmm.
What could be so controversial about it? That it would, as I said in my lead up to my article about it, that I think they're awaiting hell to freeze over.
Well, right now, with Hillary running for the White House, you figure they're trying to do damage control on all of these accumulated scandals stretching back a quarter of a century. And
they've got a lot to do.
They've got a lot of work to do. We got to take a break for commercials. Back in 4 minutes with Dave Martin. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Dave Martin. We're looking back at the murder of former White House intern Mary Mahoney at the Starbucks in Georgetown. And again, with Hillary's campaign for the White House, all of the accumulated suspicions and scandals of the Clintons for the last quarter of a century are now current events and topics fit for discussion. So, Dave, you apparently posted a comment on the story about Mary Mahoney at this Little Dixie Dynamite website, which I'm looking at right now, and I'm going to link to this thing. And your comment has not been approved for publication, but you wanted to read it to us. Dave, are you there?
About the whole question of surveillance cameras as it applies to the Foster case as well. So that I don't forget it, I'm reminding, because that's apparently what it put an end to my series of 5 articles. So here's what I wrote. I wrote the article that Daniel DeLuca posted above. It was the first in a series. The last in the series was titled Starbucks Surveillance, and I give the URL for that. I posted it on a Saturday. On Sunday morning, I received an email that said simply, for the sake of your family, forget you ever heard of Katie Mahoney.
Okay.
The email address of the sender was razor@this.member. Mahoney went by the name Katie and not by her first name, so this person knew it was Katie Mahoney.
Mm-hmm.
I sent it to the local police, but they blew me off.
Imagine my
shock. I also sent it to the reporters at the Washington Post and the Washington Times who had been covering the story, but neither responded. It is logical to conclude that whoever ordered the murders was also responsible for the threatening email, is it not?
That would definitely be reasonable. And
let me finish.
Okay.
I don't think there is much better evidence that Carl Derek Cooper is serving a life sentence for someone else's heinous, high-level crime. End of quote.
Well, Cooper was basically interrogated for 54 hours straight to get a confession, which he immediately recanted. It's a replay of the James Earl Ray situation, where they just
very much so. Well, it's a replay in a lot of ways because they bent the law just out of all recognition in order to make him subject to the death penalty. Washington, D.C. does not have a death penalty. This was a garden variety crime in Washington, D.C. So, really, he shouldn't have been subject to the death penalty. But they got him under some conspiracy charge with no co-conspirators, a federal charge that somehow is subject to the death penalty, and threatened him with that. Well, he's seen how they've jerked him around. Are you going to bet your life that I'm going to get justice? They scared him into completing guilty.
They convicted him on 50 counts, racketeering, robbery, the Starbucks murders, and the Washington Post did report in that Cooper was telling the FBI agents, I had nothing to do with Starbucks. But he was railroaded the way James Earl Ray was, and now they've got him locked up incommunicado in a maximum security prison so nobody can get his side of the story. You know, it's obvious what happened here.
The title of my article, Starbucks Fallback Fall Guy. See, he didn't exactly confess at first. He fingered another guy. And so he was I was just the lookout. And here's your murderer. And both the Washington Times and Washington Post bannered that headline. They've got the murderer. You know, his name is Maurice Boo Covington. Yeah. And he was going to be the fall guy. And here's why. There was a witness who had tried to gain entrance to the store. It was locked. He saw the workers inside the store. It was closed for the night. Well, the theory was, and the person who got entry must have known one of the people inside.
Yeah, there was no damage to the locks and the doors. And
right, but Covington, no damage to the lock or anything. Well, Covington happened to be a friend of the black guy that was killed. So, perfect one. Covington's the guy. It turns, I don't know what his alibi was, but it must have been one really good alibi. Because the next day, Covington has an alibi. And he got off clean, and never heard another word about him. And it was, you know, they'd convinced Cooper that this was his ticket out if he can finger somebody else. Well, but that turned out the guy he fingered had a great alibi, so now he's the fallback. No, we're going to get you. And you know, and they made him subject to the death penalty and all. So then they just finesse. Well, how if he didn't know anybody inside, how did he get in through the locked door? They never answered that question.
Yeah, and how could they claim it was a robbery? There was nothing taken from the Starbucks.
Also, two guns were used in the shooting, so you assume that at least two people did the shooting. Well, no, now they've got the answer to that. How did that happen? Well, he used two separate guns, right. So he gained entrance through a locked door, and he shot these three people with two different guns. Then he said, well, what, we don't have any evidence. Where is the guns? He said, well, I buried them on the home for unwed mothers in Hyattsville, Maryland. And so he said that he couldn't remember exactly where because he had wanted to use them for another job, and he went digging for them, couldn't find them. Well,
yeah. Listen, we're all right. Well, listen, I put up a link to that Dixie website. We're running out of time here. Has anything surfaced in the Vince Foster case recently that I might be unaware of?
I don't know, but I want to say something about the surveillance on that. The surveillance is key. I think that's why I got the threatening thing, because I got into the whole question of surveillance. You know, there were probably a working surveillance camera inside the Starbucks at the time, as there are in almost all retail establishments.
Yeah, that would have shown.
But so I was looking into that, but our newspapers. You know, we can't count on them to ask that question. What do the surveillance cameras show? Well, that occurred in the Foster case when I had a coworker who told me that he worked for the MITRE Corporation, which is CIA-connected operation. That he said they installed the security cameras at the White House grounds, and they would have easily told exactly what time Vince Foster left the White House compound. Not when he left the White House proper. That's on the record, and the last guy to see him. But all you got to do is look for the surveillance cameras, and you know, did he drive his own car out? Did he go out alone? Did he walk out of the compound? If he didn't go out alone, who was with him? All of these things. So I raised that issue with Chris Ruddy. You know, the one I was working closely with Ruddy at the time, talking to him regularly. So what about this?
All right. Well, listen, we got to take another 4-minute break for commercials. We'll be back with the last segment of our program today with Dave Martin. And hello, Aloha, America. Welcome back to the last segment of our program today. We're talking with Dave Martin. We're talking about a very serious issue in both the Mary Mahoney murder and the murder of White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster, that there should have been ample videotapes from surveillance cameras, and we are told, do not exist. Now, the White House obviously is the most secured residence on Earth. And again, confirmed that the MITRE Corporation had set up the camera system for the White House. The reality is the only evidence that Vince Foster left the White House under his own power is a single handwritten notation in a logbook. There's nothing else to back it up. There's no video. There's no key card. There's nothing whatsoever.
But of course, there is a surveillance record. But did our fine newspapers ask that question? What does a surveillance record show? No. So I asked that of Chris Ruddy, the supposed lead investigator who's questioning it. He got back to me a few days later and said that his White House inside contact told him that Bill Clinton had all those surveillance cameras removed because they were cramping his tomcatting style.
Mm-hmm.
You believe that?
No, I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. I mean,
I told that to the former MITRE guy. Here's what Chris Ruddy says. He just rolled his eyes in disbelief.
You know, I can understand the cameras in the Oval Office and the President's private office and a couple other rooms being shut down for that reason, but not the cameras on the outside of the White House covering the entrances and exits. You know, because, you know, as horny as Bill Clinton was, he wasn't shagging his victims right there in the front lobby.
Yeah, well, hey, look, I just got a reminder. I got a scoop for you. I didn't know there's in the news today about fixed tennis matches. Have you heard about that?
No, I haven't. I'm not a big tennis fan anyway. But
well, anyway. Apparently that's in the news. Do you know who was at the meeting on the Nate Landau estate that Vince Foster attended with Webb Hubbell his last weekend on the globe?
No.
Nick Bollettieri was at the meeting, of all people.
Oh, my goodness.
Vince Foster and Webb Hubbell. Nick Bollettieri is the big tennis guru down in Florida.
I don't think that's the reason Vince Foster was murdered, to be very honest. I think it had more to do with the Clinton Presidential Blind Trust being fraudulent.
Well, I mean, but Bollettieri, you wonder, you know, it's an interesting connections here.
Well, there's a lot of connections. Not all of them are relevant here.
But it's interesting. Of all people, we were wondering what the heck is Nick Bollettieri doing at this meeting with these guys?
No idea.
Now we find out that tennis is corrupt. So, well, that explains it.
I'm looking at the article right now here. Everything's being... It's like organized crime took over all the government. And now everything's... the fixes are in there. You know, we're going to fix this, we're going to fix that. And it is a very dark...
Well, also, you know, we'd like to think that Donald Trump is a knight in shining armor here, but my goodness, he was in the casino business.
Well, I'm not seeing Trump as a knight in shining armor, but I am seeing him as an outsider who's going to shake things up and maybe break loose some of the accumulated dreck from the last 25 years. And we're seeing already from the McCain campaign and the Debbie Wasserman Schultz campaign, they're up against stiff opposition. I'm predicting a serious anti-incumbent, anti-friend of Israel fever is going to grip the nation this election season.
Yeah, and certainly Trump has the right enemies.
Yeah, he does have the right enemies, but most important, he's got his own money. He can't be bought.
We can only hope that he's refreshing, a breath of fresh air.
Well, I'm concerned, you know, they're trying to Ron Paul him out of the race, and if that doesn't work, they may try the Robert Kennedy approach. So I'm glad he's got his own private security operating inside the Secret Service protective detail he's been assigned.
I'm hoping he has somebody like Louis Farrakhan has. If you ever watch a Louis Farrakhan speech, you see those guys standing beside him and looking at the crowd.
Well, that's not an image you want to put out on the campaign trail. That's what makes protective details so difficult. They have to protect the client without making it obvious that the client is terrified of the crowd.
Yeah, exactly. But Farrakhan sends a message. You mess with me. It'll be the last messing you do.
All righty. Well, listen, Dave, I'm going to let you go here. We've got a few minutes left in the show, and I got a couple of headlines I really need to get at before end of show today. So thank you very much. And, again, I think this is the first time I've actually spoken to you over all the years that we've traded emails about the Foster case and all this other stuff that we've been talking about. And I always post your articles to my website. And I think this is the first time we've actually spoken to each other, and I still have no idea what you'll look like, which is such as the virtual world as it is. So, Dave Martin, thank you again very much. We'll have you back. Let me know if there are any new developments, either in the Mahoney case or the Foster case. We'll get you back on the show.
Okay, fine.
All right. Thank you very much there. Now then, we're getting some breaking news. A federal judge has just rejected President Obama's assertion of executive privilege over the records pertaining to Operation Fast and Furious. Okay? Now, this was the operation in which the same U.S. government that insists you should not be allowed to have military-style weaponry was spending your tax dollars to send those exact same kind of weapons and, worse, fully automatic, down to Mexican drug criminals. And some of them came back into the United States of America and were used to commit crimes, which led to the death of some U.S. government officers. And that's what kicked the whole scandal off. And so now Obama's attitude is, you don't need to know what we were doing. We had a really good reason to give all these guns to the Mexican drug cartels. I think it was to wipe out their competition, and have a monopoly over the drug trade, like they were doing with Iran-Contra. Same old business, government-sanctioned drug running. And Obama has resisted releasing the records over just what they were doing, spending your tax dollars, giving these dangerous weapons to Mexican drug criminals. And Obama exerted executive privilege, which, by the way, does not actually exist anywhere in the Constitution or the law. It's a made-up excuse by which the president can say, it's none of your business what I'm doing with your country, with your money, with your children. And the judge just basically said, yeah, there is no executive privilege here. So the Obama administration is either going to turn those records over or they're going to be looking at a contempt of court charge, and Obama could be facing obstruction of justice, which is an impeachable offense. So that's breaking now. Okay. Apparently out in California, they're still dealing with that horrific methane leak, and apparently air regulators were going to get together to talk about putting in a system to capture and burn off the methane pouring out of that well. And, of course, burning off surplus methane is a standard procedure in oil drilling fields and oil refineries. If you drive by them, you'll always see a tower that's got a flame going. That's basically what they're talking about. And I don't think they should delay it, because better a controlled burn than a spark or a match or a bolt of lightning explodes the whole fuel-air mixture above Simi Valley all at once. Now, the problem, though, with catch and burn is that will get rid of the methane, but it won't get rid of the radioactive component in the carbon or the other toxic materials that are pouring out of the ground. This is going to be another Fukushima. They don't know how to fix it. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get up to the Jim Goddard Show in Vancouver. We'll be back tomorrow, Wednesday, hump day here at GCN. Until then, polls are showing Americans are starting to ask important questions about what's going on in this nation. You please be there with the answers when they ask. That's the best that you can do right now. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.